a Berkeley Police Department policy to not ticket white city council members. If this is the case, of course, it's only fair and impartial policing for those with power and perhaps wealth. To those without power and wealth, such a commendation may send a message to persons black, brown, and white. Try to talk your way out of a ticket with a claim of status or a sob story. Not a good deal, not a good idea. Civil rights and civil liberty organizations strongly advise persons stopped by the police to assert their right to remain silent, as anything you say can be used against you.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop.
Okay, you got the point, I think.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the comment? Yes.
I would like not to be taped. So, did I see my name or anything? I've never been here before. Okay, so excuse me, I'm sorry. I've been at some of these gatherings where the right wing have come to the city of Berkeley. I've seen the mugshots that are posted. I think it's incredibly wrong for the mugshots to be posted before their arrest, before there are charges, before any of these things have happened, or maybe they're arrested, but there haven't been charges, or it's kind of iffy information out there. It's putting people's lives in danger. It is stopping people from coming for their rights. It makes me nervous when I go to peacefully protest the alt-right coming to my city. It makes me nervous that my face is going to be put all over the web. I don't want to take my child. I've been told that I can't wear something over my face. I don't want that in my life, but I want the ability to peacefully protest the alt-right coming to this city. I agree with you about weapons. I don't believe that we should have weapons. But I also noticed that the percentage of people who were arrested were deemed to be anti-fascist. What happened to the alt-right pictures? I saw quite a few alt-right people with weapons hitting. I do not want my picture taken. Excuse me, whoever you are in the back, please don't take my picture. That's what I'm here about. I don't want my picture taken.
But you must understand you're in a public environment.
It is a public meeting.
Hearing, you have no right to 14th Amendment privacy. So that's just
But I personally
I
don't want my picture taken. So I get to say that. I don't want my picture on the web. When I go to a peaceful protest, I'm a peaceful demonstrator, and I think it's incredibly wrong what the police are doing, and I don't want to see it in this city. This is where I live. I want to be able to tell the alt-right, get out of my city. What I saw as a peaceful demonstrator was that our police are supposed to be protecting us as peaceful citizens. And what I saw with my eyes was the Berkeley police, who I have a lot of respect for, arresting and targeting anti-fascists and not the alt-right who were here. And I just want to make that really clear, that the Berkeley police, I didn't see any pictures of the right-wing people who were here. I didn't see their faces out there on the web from Berkeley PD. I saw our faces, the people who were peacefully demonstrating, and I'm super angry about that. And I don't want my picture taken. It's my picture. It's me. I could have religious reasons, but it takes my soul, and you don't know that when you're taking my picture.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment at this time? All right, seeing as there's no more public comment, we can move on to approval of the minutes from last meeting. Are there any changes to the minutes as in the agenda? If not, can we approve the minutes from last meeting with any consent? All right, so moved. Next is my report. Thank you for being here today, everyone. We have a very packed agenda for tonight, so I'm just going to remind everyone that I'll be doing time checks throughout the night to make sure that we're moving forward. And with that, I want to encourage commissioners to try to stay on topic when we're discussing items and have in mind an action that we want to take, so we're always moving in that direction. Finally, we will be ending at 9:30 today, so that we can go into closed session at the end of our meeting. So keeping that in mind as well with time. That's it for my report. Moving on to the PRC officer's report.
Thank you, Chair. There have been no new complaints filed since late June still. BOI was held on last Thursday, and I thank Commissioners Sherman, Roberts, and Matthews for attending and presiding over that BOI. I distributed to the commissioners a draft annual report, so I'm giving you 2 whole weeks to comment on it, and please bring it back to your, to the next meeting, which is October 10th. I passed out, one of the things I passed out was the motion that was made last night it ended up being by Councilmember Hahn regarding posting of photos of arrestees, and this is relevant to your item 10. No, not 10. Item 9C3. Wanted to let you know that the Volt Police Review Project, where upper class students are training first years to represent complainants at our BOIs. The project is kicking off for this semester. We're going to have 2 upper class persons from last year training 3 more for this year. So that project will be continuing. They've changed their name from the Bolt Police Review Project to the Berkeley Police Review Project, consistent with the phasing out of the name of John Bolt from the law school. I also handed out a couple items from Councilmember Worthington that are relevant to the PRC. Well, one is directly relevant, has to do with training, the other has to do with the 120-day time limit for discipline, so it's a little indirectly related, and those are just for your information. And the last item is I sent an email to all of you. I heard from some of you about a possible presentation on de-escalation training by Sergeant Spencer Fomby, and he would present what the officers get trained in, or how they are trained in de-escalation tactics. So the date that he threw out was Wednesday, October 17th, and I did hear positive responses from Commissioners Allenby and Calavita, maybe from Commissioner Sherman, I know from Commissioner Roberts, but you came 2 years ago, right, Commissioner Roberts? No?
Yeah, it's the same, is it gonna be the same presentation?
I would basically.
Yeah, I was.
Totally, okay. Anybody else able to commit or tell me they cannot make it?
Sorry, what was the date again?
Wednesday the 17th, so that's the, probably 7, yeah, so that's the off week between our regular meetings.
What time and how long will it be?
7 to 9,
I can finish that.
you can, okay.
When is the date?
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
October
17th. Did Commissioner Ramsey, did you say something? Or yes or no, or you don't know?
No, I think I'll probably be okay.
Yes, okay. All right.
I can attend as well.
Can.
I can.
Okay, I think we'll make that a yes then, that's a pretty solid majority. And sorry, Commissioner Schiffman, you'll have to arrange your plans. Okay, all right, that's it for me, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the Chief of Police's report.
Lieutenant Files for Chief Greenwood. If you wanted me to relay that you couldn't be here tonight due to work commitments that had time issues going to the NACOL and ISP next week. He had to get a bunch of things off his desk in a timely manner by Friday so he could make the travel arrangement. But he did want me to report to you staffing as he always does. Currently we have 159 employed with 21 of those people on various leave statuses, whether it be training, injuries, what have you, which gives us an actual working force of 138. That's including the chief and all us command staff types down to the brand newest person who just graduated FTO who's out in the streets right now. So 130 of us out there doing police work. We just started a new timesheet just this last week, which means that the timesheet that I mentioned before, I know the chief reported in this last meeting that the timesheet itself had a few vacancies. That's still the case. We're still pretty much holding status quo with that. One of the important things to report from that, of starting the new timesheet, is that we did start the recruitment retention team. They're up and running and they're doing things. In fact, some of the things is that within this week, we've already interviewed 28 people, with none of them moving forward in the process. So that's a normal attrition, if you will, rate as far as how many people you interview as to how many actually move forward in the process. And they still have to move forward. That 9, we're guaranteed they won't all make it, but yet that's where we are in the process. So we are moving forward with recruitment and retention and trying to get that up to speed. As I know as the chief explained it before, we had a certain size pipe to get people in. We want to increase that pipeline and make it bigger so that we can recruit and get those additional bodies we need. We had the barbershop forum Monday, which about 12 staff officers, 12 staff members and the chief went to with positive feedback. A lot of good discussion and conversation. For those of you who are noticing, I have a pink patch in my hand, which I was instructed to pass out to the commission. It is for breast cancer awareness. Many of us in our families and our lives have survivors, and this is something, and people who have suffered from breast cancer, we feel this is important for us to show that outward support to family members, the community, and everyone to say, hey, it matters, and we care about it, and we want to wear it with pride. So within the police profession, it's quite common to pass out patches to your friends. So here we go.
You hope you oh, you're on the record now.
That's quite all right. Mr. Sherman, I've called you friend for many years. So.
Oh, you call me your favorite hippie or something.
So, with that said, we have moved forward with the healthy options vending machine. I know that was talked about last time, but we actually have healthy food available. That really becomes important when you're working the later watches and things. The only thing that's open is a 7-Eleven and or something that you can't get to. And something a little more meaty, no pun intended, is the chief hopes to have the body-worn policy to you guys by Friday and rolling out training in mid to late October so that we can actually go forward with body-worn cameras. The date he gave me was 10/22, and I'm going to share that with you, barring any unforeseen instances or anything that would be problematic. But that's the chief's report.
Thank you.
I have one question.
Yeah.
I know I mentioned this last week, but just wanted to try to encourage the police association representative attending. I'm sorry, I mentioned this last week, but just wanted to encourage the police association's representative to attend. I know there's questions that I would have. I was told at one Coffee for a Cop that event that I guess they felt that they weren't utilized in earlier meetings, but and stopped attending. But I would encourage them to hopefully come back because there are times that I think their input would be very useful.
I will pass that along to the association leadership.
So, Lieutenant Files, we usually have an open question panel for the chief. Is that something you're comfortable with?
Sure.
All right. If there's any questions. Yes.
I have one, just to confirm, the 10/22 date is the date they're gonna go in the field?
That is the anticipated, that's the hopeful date that it's going to go in the field. We will start rolling out training, and as that training happens, then we'll start deploying.
I'm sorry, were we talking about body camera?
Yeah. Good, stay on track. We've
Trying our
been
best.
waiting, I know you have been too, but it's time.
It's time.
Are there any more questions? Yes.
Last week, we had asked the chief about whether or not there were any policies related to clandestine or secret recordings of individuals during traffic stops or at any point. He said he would look to see if there were any general orders. Did he communicate anything to you about whether or not he was successful in finding anything?
We talked about it, but we didn't talk about clandestine, so I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing.
I'm talking about recordings when the public doesn't know that they're being recorded.
Like now. So as an experienced,
Well, we know we're being
as an experienced traffic individual who's been working traffic since, gosh, in the traffic unit since 2003, on and off at various times, I can tell you we've been doing that since 1998, 1999, and there hasn't been a policy because there hasn't needed to be a policy. And before you get apoplectic. And we have gone through years and years of utilizing a policy, utilizing the tapes for exculpatory reasons, for reasons of proving things that didn't happen, and things that oftentimes people are accusing of things that happen, and they just don't happen. So the tapes have been very helpful, and we've used them, and we haven't had any problems with them. I see the issue going away on October 22nd, when we have body-worn cameras, and every encounter is recorded. I, working traffic, find it very useful to be able to record that and say, this is a stop. Ma'am, sir or ma'am, I stopped you for this reason, at this location. I need your registration license, proof of insurance. I will be issuing a citation. It makes it really simple as to the exchange that went on. And it is later on, when things are called into question, it's real easy to present. So we've been doing it for many, many, many years without a problem, without any issue. And again, when we have body-worn cameras, it won't be an issue.
Chair, can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
So, when you say you've been doing it since 1999, does that mean every traffic stop is recorded, or is it selective?
I wouldn't say selective. I mean, there have been times where I pressed record and my recorder was full because I had a full day's work. So you attempt to use it every time because you want to have that record every time of what you've done. Officers use it to refresh their memory before going to court. You may get a citation in March, and by the time the court system works around to getting to it, it's October, November, and you're expected to remember what happened hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of citations ago, where that becomes difficult. So you go to that, you look it up, go, oh yeah, then you listen to it, and it helps you with your notes. You go, oh, now I remember that citation. So
as a practice, we're recorded on a traffic stop.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
As a practice, what you do is record us on any traffic stop?
Yes, ma'am. As a practice, the few people that work traffic, because right now I only have 2 officers in the street, they will record you. If you're stopped by a motorcycle officer, there's a very good chance that you're being, and by motorcycle I mean traffic, a person who has these wings and rides motorcycles. If you're stopped by a traffic officer, if you've been stopped by a traffic officer since the 90s, of my personal knowledge, since the 90s, you have probably been recorded.
And so I wonder if it wouldn't be a good idea to let people know when they're stopped that they're being recorded, like we do when we call up for some service at Comcast. They say your phone call is being recorded.
I could see, I know there's been many times where I've told people point blank, I am recording this
It might be a
conversation.
good policy to let people know.
I don't write policy, but I can understand your concern.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions? Yes.
Well, I would just like to also, I'm still trying to follow up on the June 20th subcommittee's report that was submitted to the chief so many months ago. I guess I'm curious if there's any indication, should we expect that the chief won't be responding to that? Is that the?
Can you clarify? I'm not sure what you're talking about.
So many months ago, there was a subcommittee that was charged with investigating what happened on June 20th at Longfellow Middle School. During an Urban Shield, there was a public hearing that there was an incident. There were allegations of police misconduct. There were allegations that situation got out of hand. The subcommittee was formed, wrote a report, asked for a couple clarifying questions, sent that report to the chief as a draft report pending a response to those questions. We have not heard, the chief has not responded. So what I'm trying to understand is, are we decided that we're not expecting a response? And so that's.
Or you pose that question to me as me, I would defer to Ms. Lee.
Is that resolved?
No, Chief Greenwood informed the commission at a meeting that because of the lawsuits that were filed, he would not be pending litigation responding to the report.
chair, that's correct, I chaired that meeting, and I remember the chief informing the commission of
Okay,
that,
all right,
of that
okay.
situation.
All right, so we'll, thank you.
You had a question?
I just have a statement really quickly, because I know that it's not on the agenda, but we're going to NACO, this weekend, Ms. Lee and Mr. Norris going to NACO. And just wanted for the commission to know and to thank the chief directly. The chief has acquiesced to participate in one of the boards and one of the discussion panels dealing with law enforcement and the homeless. Where do we go from here? So I wanted the commission to know that he will be a panelist at NACO. I was able to invite him for him to participate to one of those modules, and to thank him publicly in front of the commissioners for his willingness to attend the conference and to participate in one of the panels. And when he comes back, I'm sure he'll have more to say. So thank you.
I will relay that message to us.
All right, if there are no more questions, we can move on. Thank you, and I'd like to thank you for these as well.
You're very welcome.
Moving on to the subcommittee reports.
Excuse me, Chairman.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Lieutenant Files, I thought you were gonna introduce Sergeant Malero.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. I thought you all knew Sergeant Malero.
Okay.
This is Sergeant Cesar Malero, who is one of the newest investigators in the Internal Affairs Bureau. He reports directly to the chief and investigates any allegations of misconduct by employees.
Well, and he's taking Sergeant Cardoza's place.
Correct. Sergeant Cardoza rotated back out to patrol, and Sergeant Malero was fortunate enough to be selected for this specialized task.
Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the subcommittee reports. We have the homeless encampment subcommittee.
My understanding is that we were waiting for information from the city relative to the District 9 Federal Court decision and how that would impact enforcement. So I'm curious as to whether there's been communication.
I haven't heard anything. They were.
Was a
they
letter
were-
sent? Did we send communication?
No, what I was told a couple weeks ago was that revised administrative regulation that was crafted to, in conformity with the council's policy direction, was just about ready to go when that Court of Appeals case came down. And so it had to go back for revision in light of what that case said about, and the case had to do with criminalizing sleeping on the streets.
So does that, in the absence of any kind of written communication, I'm just kind of curious, like, what does govern? Like, how can we find out what is the city's approach to these encampments at this point? What policies, have they suspended their policies, or are they going with what they already have written until they revise their policies, or is there a way we can find that out?
I think they're going with what they have so far, but I'm not really positive.
I wonder how we can find that out.
Well, I can ask.
Would that be-
On an informal basis, sure.
You know, could you CC me on that? Thank you.
Is that it for your report? Okay, the prioritizing safety for sex workers subcommittee.
Yeah, so I think the intention was to get volunteers for the subcommittee during the first meeting in October. So hopefully people will be thinking about whether they want to participate or not. I also contacted Emmeline Campbell, who is the chair of the Commission on the Status of Women for the City of Berkeley, to try to stay coordinated. At the last meeting, Ms. Lee had indicated that when there's two commissions working on an issue, that they often have each have a subcommittee and then choose to meet at the same time. In discussing it with Chairperson Campbell, she had indicated their preference maybe to not necessarily create their own subcommittee, but maybe to have one person attend ours. I think it would make sense to have that person made part of our subcommittee, so maybe three police review commissioners and one for the Committee of Status of Women, but we'll be able to figure that out at the first meeting. I also received some information from the chief about the rates of arrest for prostitution in the city over the last year, which was extraordinarily low, which was, I think it was one arrest. So we're starting to get some feedback from the police department. Also indicated that the special victim unit has been suspended due to staffing shortages. But, so we'll still try to get some input from the police department on this once we get up and running. And also, we realize there's some overlap with the Lexipol subcommittee. One of the policies that we're reviewing, which the subcommittee has pulled out to make sure that we can coordinate with the efforts of the prioritizing the safety of sex workers. So, in any event, to sum up, it's really the next step is at the next meeting to take volunteers for the subcommittee to see who wants to work beyond myself.
Commissioner Ramsey, could you give us some indication of what kind and how much work would be involved in this subcommittee?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be an area that's gonna be much controversy, so I don't think there will be a ton of work. I think, we have the names of all the people who put the policy together in San Francisco, have some contact information for people in San Francisco Police Department and the DA's office and the usefulness of the policy. So I suspect that it will just be one or two meetings to hear from those individuals and from individuals inside the police department to see whether it's the sort of thing that makes sense for Berkeley. And so to answer your question, I think it will only probably be a couple of meetings and then having to adjust the policy essentially to see whether there's something that the police thinks is appropriate. Again, from my viewpoint, the point of the policy is not to ensure that police officers don't arrest sex workers who are reporting sexual assaults, because we know they don't do that currently, and the reality is the practice is such that they wouldn't. But having a policy in place, at least we've learned from San Francisco, that in communicating either medical workers or organizations who work with sex workers, that there is a policy in place, may help remove the fear and encourage people to report things that they otherwise wouldn't.
If I may, the chief did brief me on that today, in case that you had any additional. We have only arrested 2 people since 2015. One of them I was involved in. We actually rescued, and I use the term with pride, we rescued a person, a juvenile, and returned them back to their family who was a sex worker. So the intent is not to vilify but to rescue them, and we plan a policy to reflect on.
So hopefully it's something that, people of different parties can agree on. Ultimately, things like San Francisco is out front on this, and we'll be able to do something that makes sense. So to answer your question now, I am hopeful that there will only be a couple of meetings, and it will be one meeting where we can hear from some of the key people who worked on this in San Francisco, and try to, the one tricky thing that may be is trying to get the Alameda County DA's office involved. But, it's one step at a time, and it may be just that we're making a recommendation to them, but, BPD can do what they think is appropriate. And then a second meeting to try to craft a policy that we can then send up to the commission. So that's my hope. My hope is that perhaps the police department even ends up accepting it before it even comes back to the commission. So we'll see.
Thank you. Okay, we can now move on to old business, item 9A. This is my item, and I'd like to start by apologizing to the commission for getting to you so late. I just handed it out. It's the handout titled Guiding Principles. I also did not have a chance to give this to the chief with enough time to get feedback, so I will be waiting on his feedback. I feel like with that in mind, it's not entirely necessary that we pass this right now, but I would like to note that with all the feedback that I got last week, I did not incorporate things that the BPD should do for us. I kind of made it more of like a one-sided, not one-sided relationship, but I listed things that the PRC commissioners should keep in mind. There was some feedback saying that I should also incorporate what the BPD can do, but I kind of figured that these are our principles that we're voting on and we're adopting, and we can't really ask the BPD to adopt the same principles, in my opinion. So that was kind of my thinking about that. If anybody has any objection to that or wants to take this in a different direction, please let me know now.
All I would add, because I wasn't here last time, all I would make a recommendation to add, because it's something that I do as the chair of the Mark Police Oversight Board, I meet quarterly with the unions and the chief. So what I would add is for
extend that for the chair to meet quarterly with the unions and with the chief in separate meetings. I do that at BART, and it's very beneficial.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Sherman?
I think it's getting better, so
Okay.
thank you for working on it. But you kind of answered my question, but I'm not sure I agree with where you're at about the department and the BPA adopting something similar or the same thing. Because it does refer here to a two-way street, a lot of things. And if it's a one-way street over here and a zero street over there, then that's not gonna work. And so it seems to me, when you talk to the chief or whatever, you might ask his advice on not only to get his input about what he might wanna add to this to make it more relevant to the department, but maybe what he thinks about the BPA involved, or you could talk to somebody from BPA or something like that, because I think it would be helpful to have all agree. And then since we change over periodically, we could revisit it every year or twice a year or something like that to make sure it stays relevant, something if we needed to. That would be my input.
I'll definitely bring that up.
And this is a perfect example from my perspective where I would love to have the input of the Police Officers Association about, what they think before we move forward.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was gonna propose along those same lines, but more radical, and that is that since this is a two-way collaboration, instead of having something put out by the PRC, I would like to see guiding principles written together with the police department.
All right. Would that help, like, if I send it to the chief and, go off of what Commissioner
Well,
Roberts?
it's not just a matter of them, reviewing and responding to what you say. It would be a different type of document in a sense. It would be a document that establishes principles for our mutual collaboration.
Okay.
And also I think, to the union representative for the police would be the other party that I think should have some input, or have some thoughts. I mean, not just input, like you said, have some thoughts about what would be appropriate.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Pritchard and Sherman?
I appreciate the spirit of respect and in that sense, efficiency as we attempt to wrestle with the issues before the Police Review Commission. But, I have to say that we already have a mission statement. It's in the establishing ordinance. And so I'm not really sure how this fits into it. And, to be honest, I don't feel like it's our job to recruit for the police department. I feel like barely any, we have, I'm receiving stories from people who feel like they have been mistreated by members of the Berkeley Police Department. I cannot convince them to use this process that we have here. We have some very serious challenges in the current environment. And I feel like to offer a little bit of balance in this equation, that our focus should be on, if we have extra time, if we have that, and hearing the concerns of the community. I don't feel like to support the department in staffing, they're a paid organization. They have vast resources. I don't understand why we would be spending our time doing that. And again, I have to say that it really does feel like we're being asked to round off our edges, to participate where they want to participate, to hear from them, et cetera, et cetera. And where's the community? What effort are we putting into that? So it feels like we're trying to shift the PRC to become some kind of subcommittee or some kind of some adjunct of the police department, and when I read the establishing ordinance, it says that, you know, we're a distinct entity, that the independence of the Police Review Commission was written into the establishing ordinance for a reason. Because when that wall comes down, there's no counterweight. And so I feel that my primary responsibility is to the community. And although I appreciate, again, I think of course it's good for us to be respectful and to offer opportunities for discussion. But there's several parts in here that make me wonder what the overall effect or intention is. And if we are seen as being an adjunct of the police department, you can bet that I mean, we're a $700,000 a year organization at this point, or somewhere thereabouts. And we have no sustained complaints, and we're not, to be honest, able to offer, even in our policy reviews, we're being, what can I say, feels railroaded. To have Lexipol done, Oakland is not doing what Lexipol, they rejected it. They didn't want to become a rubber stamp. And so I chaff at this, with all respect to the chair. I understand that you're trying to make a positive difference.
Well, I'll let Commissioner Sherman respond first.
You want to respond to that first? I'll wait.
Oh, well, my only comment was that that definitely was not the intention, and I understand where you got that from. And the way that it is worded does give off that intention in some parts. So I would like to try to fix it to not give off that intention and maybe rethink what like the purpose of this document is. But I do appreciate you bringing that to that point. Commissioner Sherman.
Yeah, first of all, I would tend to agree with my fellow commissioner on the staffing thing. I think that's something that needs to be discussed. I actually did try to recruit for the Berkeley Police Department. My next door neighbor is a Concord cop, and I was out there last week, and that's where she lives. And I did talk to him about, do you know anybody that might want to come? And he was an ex-Bartlett police officer, and he blew down to me in the short conversation we had how short-staffed they are, and what an impact that is having on public safety in Concord. So we're not alone in this, but I did do my little bit to try to do staffing, which I don't think is inappropriate. So I think that's for future discussion. But it ties into a little bit of what I want to get to, because I want to turn to this mission statement that was referenced. And it says the mission of the Police Review Commission is to provide for community participation in setting and reviewing police department policies, practices, and procedures. And I'm going to leave out the rest. And so I rhetorically asked Commissioner Pritchard, to what end? To what end is that sentence there? My answer to that statement is to help make Berkeley a safe, sustainable community for all its citizens. And how do we go about that? We need that partnership with the Berkeley Police Department. And I won't pat myself in the back, but I was quoting in the Daily Cow, because I was at the Coffee with a Cop the other day, and I said it something like this. I'm not happy with the wording. This is not quite what I said. But I have said this many, many times on this commission. I'll say it again. I want a safe community, and I care very much at the same time for the safety of police officers. To do that, it has to be a partnership. And I would like to, when we get to do this, I'm going to do a little bit better wording. When we get to pursue this more, I think as part of, and this mission statement, fine at the time, but the PRC, the BPD, the city of Berkeley has evolved a long way since, 1973, 76? Whatever it was. And so take this mission statement and then, like we're doing everything else we've done ever since the very first meeting with PRC, improve and adapt to the times ahead. So I look in this, my role, I've done it all along as I've been on this commission, is to look on this as PRC is as in a partnership with the Berkeley Police Department to help make a safe community with safety that involves trust, and the more the community can trust trust the police department, the safer they are, and vice versa, the safer the police officers are. So I will inject some kind of wording into that, but I commend the chair for doing this. I think it's the right direction to take. And I will, like I say, down the road, when we get further on down this, try to work up some wording, or the chair might want to do it on her own. But I think we are in a collaborative relationship. I've done my best to try to, build on that. We're not in an adversarial road. Yes, the community, and I agree with my commissioner sometimes, yes, the community does seem like they're left out, that they don't have people speaking to them, but it's not I don't think it's our job to represent just the community. I think we represent and work with the police as well. Thank you.
Are there any last comments?
Just one last thing. We know this would have to be tweaked a bit, and my own thought is that, with regard to Andrea's comments, is that, we know that there are going to be times that we disagree with the chief or BPA. But our intention here should be about a respectful dialogue and communication about how we go about our business. And to me, that has an integrity in the process, knowing the fact, that we might be on the different parts of the page from time to time.
We're a regulatory type agency, yeah? We're supposed to be checking to make sure that what the police are doing is serving the community. If you were with a nuclear regulatory commission, if we were going out and having lunch with the whatever, we were the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. If we were going out and having lunch with the operators of a nuclear power plant, people might think there was a conflict there, right? If we were supposed to be regulating, we're supposed to be regulators.
That
So-
would change.
So for us to have
She has the floor.
too close of a relationship, then what is our purpose? If we're drawn into that, if we're not maintaining some professional distance from them, then I lose sight of the mission, and I don't understand what we're here for.
Commissioner Ramsey.
They have a boosters, right? Aren't there other PAL and there's other organizations that support the police?
Commissioner Ramsey.
I agree with Commissioner Pritchett that we should be grounded in the statute, and there's got to, and the ordinance that actually enabled the commission, but we're not regulatory. We have a quasi-judicial function, but Section 1 of the ordinance says the purpose of this ordinance is to provide for community participation in setting and reviewing police department policies, practices, and procedures. And so to the extent that that's the case, it's hard to do that without having input of the expertise of the actual people who are doing the policing. We are not police experts. I've spent 20 years in criminal law on both sides of the aisle, but I'm not a policing expert. So recognizing what our purpose is as set out by the ordinance, we're saying there has to be means to gather the information so we can actually accomplish that. So I do think we should review and scrutinize whatever sort of guidelines or principles we think are appropriate to enact that or to implement, that mission. But our mission is not purely to be a regulatory agency. It's to create a mechanism for providing community participation in setting and reviewing police department policy. That requires an open dialogue.
Thank you. I would like to take some last comments.
Sorry.
And then I would like to take any last comments and then move on, and I will again work with these recommendations and send them to the chief for input and come back with a more comprehensive document before the next meeting, so commissioners have time to look over it.
If I may just say something, and I'll do it really quickly. Because we need to move on to other aspects. Because we've been here for a long time, and there have been some times in which we have disagreed, sometimes in which we have found it very easy to agree.
But what we have found it really easy to do is to have conversations that are based on mutual respect. And you cannot have a conversation based on mutual respect when you infer one thing or the other and you go into a conversation with a biased approach. It hasn't worked for me in 20 years of collective police oversight. It's never worked for me. And I have been at the forefront of even having the tough conversation of implementing a minimal use of force policy in a police department that serves 5 counties in the Bay Area. The police department has a position of honor and service. But with that honor and service comes trust, accountability, and transparency. And the only way that you can make sure that that exists on a regular basis is by engaging them about the prospect not only on how the community wants to be policed, but how we can make sure that when they're policing, they're doing it in a safe manner, in a manner where they're appreciated for the hard work they do. So if every single engagement with the police is one of, we have the power of you to regulate you because we're an oversight agency, it misses the boat. It misses the boat on asking them to do community policing. We should do community outreach to the police department as well, because we have to have that conversation. And I'm gonna reiterate it again. In 20 years of cumulative police oversight, it has never worked the other way. It has to work with an understanding that we are in this together. And if we do it individually, because we think we can force an issue, if we say that the argument is that we cannot move forward because we're being stonewalled, then being reactive, negative, accusatory, and discriminatory can only build more walls. And if you want to make change happen for the community and for the police officers who are community members as well, in their communities, who have children, who suffer, who worry about their safety as well, if we want to treat each other with respect as human beings, we need to have a conversation. And we cannot do it from a position of either power and assuming that power is everything, or assuming that the same thing that we ask them to have, bias in the way that they do police the community, by having bias against them in the way that we evaluate them. It is a non-starter, it doesn't go anywhere, it never works. I'll ask the chair to move the agenda, please.
Thank you. If that's all right with everyone else, I would like to move on. Yes, all right. Moving on to item 9B. This is from Commissioner Pritchett.
I'm sorry, Chair, I should have, because we don't have the policy, I should have suggested postponing this.
Sorry, can't hear you?
Because we don't have the policy, I should have suggested postponing this when we were approving the agenda.
Do we have to make a motion on this?
Well, no, I mean, I don't know. Commissioner Pritchett,
I was informed last meeting that if an item is on the agenda, that it is within our rights to make a request for information.
yes.
I would like to make some requests for information. I would like not only the copy of the most current policy, I would also like, I have a huge concerns about the interaction and the ways that iPhones are being used with the body cameras. I believe I object to the rollout of the body-worn cameras without understanding how they interact with the iPhones. I protest. I believe that we need information not only on what the department, how are they, we just learned, we're just being told, how foolish are we to sit here and to say, oh, we're gonna have a body-worn camera policy. Oh, by the way, we've been secretly recording you for decades without policies because we don't need policies. It makes a joke of this entire process. So even if we don't have a body-worn cameras policy, they're gonna get rolled out anyway. And the issues around separation, what access? In Oakland, I am told, they don't allow officers to preview their footage before writing their police reports. And the idea that there are iPhones, which if I as an officer, and who knows, like if they're out videotaping and I say secretly, because if you don't tell somebody they're being recorded, give me another word for it. It's clandestine, surreptitious, whatever you like. But it's very, and when only some of us who get told about the existence of these recordings have the ability to file the Public Records Act, of course, to recover them. If officers are walking around with iPhones, department-issued iPhones, and body-worn cameras, they say maybe their camera is not on, maybe they're secretly recording an audio, who knows? We sure don't, because we don't have the policies. We don't have a commitment from them to follow the policies. So I want any and all information related to, so if we need to get it from Axon, what are the protocols for these phones? What have officers been told? Is there nothing in writing that has been conveyed to the officers about the use of these iPhones? I want any and all information related to the iPhone's distribution and how officers are expected to account for the recordings that they make on those phones. And I also want the Axon policies.
What?
I want to be able to read from the manufacturer how they intend for the iPhones to interact with these cameras. It's gonna fundamentally change what Berkeley police officers bring to court. If two officers both have body, whatever, if we're both witnesses on the scene, I have body camera footage, I can show you the footage before you go to court, before you write your report. We should be very alarmed.
Commissioner Calvert.
So, it's my understanding that we're to get the policy in a couple of weeks. Is that what was reported?
No, a couple
Couple
of
of
days.
days.
Yes, the goal of the
Okay.
chief is to have, part of the reason that he's not here is he's working on those last minute issues before he
Okay.
travels.
So we'll get that policy in a couple of days.
Yes, ma'am, by the end of the week is what he told me.
Responsibility to review that policy once we get it.
Correct.
So I would propose, Commissioner Pritchett, that we carefully review that policy before it can go into effect. It's supposed to go into effect the 22nd. There'll be time for us to review the policy. I too was concerned about at what point an officer reviews the footage and all that sort of thing, and it was my understanding that there were some limitations on that. Anyway, it seems to me we have to wait to see the policy, which we will then review and critique or applaud, whichever it may be.
Yes, ma'am, for me to
All right.
make any suppositions or anything else would be simply,
All right,
I won't do
so
it.
that's our job, to review that policy.
yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Just for record and iteration of the members that have been here before, there was a subcommittee, the subcommittee met, there was a proposal of a general order, it went out to the commission reviewed it, the commission voted on it, it went to the police department and to city council. I was the city council, saying to city council that it should not be body-worn camera development rollout until there was a general order in place. City council was agreeing with that. We made that as a specific regulation. This general order went to the union for me to confer. It might come back to us with this iPhone concern as well as additional changes. But I warn the commission that our presentation to them and went to meet and confer.
About the body camera?
About the body-worn camera, so it's coming back to us with our recommendations, what the union said they could work with, what the department and command staff came up with as a compromise, and we'll have the opportunity to review that and have an opinion. Ultimately, this is one of those policies that probably is going to have to go to city council if we have any concerns about anything that's very specific.
So we'll have a recommendation to city council.
But because city council was involved in making sure that this was something in terms of the allocation of money and the process. But as a clarification, at Bart Police Department, San Francisco Police Department, unless it is a critical incident of loss of life, police officers are allowed to review the videos before they submit a report. If there's instances in which if there's an allegation of wrongdoing against a police officer, depending on the allegation, whether it's discrimination, sexual harassment, improper arrest,
bias policing, in which the police officer might also be able to look at the recording to refresh their mind. And it is acceptable under law to do so. So we have to be careful what the recommendation for Oakland is, and there are some instances in Oakland which they're allowed to, and what the other police departments allow the officers to do. If it is just a detention for, let's say, for example, for fare evasion, does that constitute a police officer cannot look at the recording before he files a report? If there is an allegation of discrimination and bias and harassment by someone based on the detention of fare evasion, that's a much different dynamic, that's a much different conversation. So we'll have to look at it that way through that prism, but it just cannot be, you cannot look at it at all, because police officers should be able to refresh their minds as they're writing a report, because they're not doing that all the time. I think the conversation has to be, what are the circumstances in which they're allowed to do so? What are the allegations, if any, in which they're not allowed to do so? So, but
And
to say,
that'll be in the policy that they're drafting?
I think the policy will probably have that, because he had it before, but Mr. Roberts can probably talk about that. But I'm just warning, I'm just giving a friendly reminder that absolutes just never work.
I understand that, and I didn't mean to imply that, but how then will this also affect our Board of Inquiry proceedings?
But I mean, that's something that Ms. Lee and everybody will have to work, but I can tell you that in other police oversight boards that I'm a member of, well, I mean, in a closed session, I see the video. The video is presented to me, I see everything that happens, I see the allegations, I see the video, I see the allegation of discrimination, he called me a word, I see all the video from 3 police officers, there's no word. I mean, so it allows you to have the ability to compare the allegation, the testimony, against your actual visual proof. So, I mean, I don't know if Ms. Lee wants to say something.
The complainant doesn't see the video, I assume.
In some instances, the complainant doesn't have the right to look at the video. The video is kept as a secure video from the police department, yes.
I just want to do a quick time check.
Yeah.
Commissioner Roberts.
Just 2 quick things. One is, you know, I was on the committee back then, the subcommittee. And so that issue about the
iPhone.
the what?
The iPhone?
No, the iPhone, that was the second thing I was gonna talk about, but the
Board of Inquiry?
the what?
Board of Inquiry?
Yeah, the Board of Inquiry. We had a few issues that came down to, that was one of them, which was how can the PRC get the body camera footage for BOI? And so, as I recall, we worked something out with the chief, and he was supportive of that. And so, we just haven't seen the final yet. That's coming back to us, and so if that isn't embodied in there somewhere, we should stand up and say, well, we need that.
Yeah.
That's one thing. On the iPhone issue, the only thing that I see right now is because that is a little different than when we talked, develop the policy with the department, is that the iPhone, we didn't know about the iPhone issue back then because we didn't know what kind of equipment they were gonna use and that kind of stuff. So I think when it comes back, I think the best thing to do would be to look at how it's addressed in the policy, and then if we feel like we ought to make recommendations on more specific use of the iPhone, we ought to put those in.
Ms. Lee.
Yes. As to the viewing by staff and members of the BOI, the chief told me that the policy that will be released will include a provision for staff to have access to body camera footage related to an investigation, and that we're still trying to work out viewing by selected commissioners on a BOI before a hearing, but for sure at a hearing, the footage will be available.
Will the complainant?
Will or won't?
Will the complainant? Will the complainant have access?
I believe so.
So
The complainant
I
will
would
have,
insist on it.
the complainant will be able to view the video.
What about prior to the hearing?
I don't know.
So I think we've established that we're going to get a policy on Friday, and then we will be discussing this policy next meeting. Commissioner Pritchett, if you had a specific motion you would like to make?
I
or
do.
request?
So what I'm proposing is that we request all information from the manufacturer regarding the interaction between the iPhones and body-worn cameras. All information about recordings made by officers via personal devices or department-issued devices, and how those are being handled.
I'm sorry.
How those are being accounted for, how are those used? How did, if the department gives an officer an iPhone, who owns that footage? Is that the officer? Do they get to do what they want with it? Tweet it out, whatever they feel like? Or is there some guidance about how that information is managed?
Commissioner Pritchett, I don't believe that the iPhone records.
You don't believe what?
I would like that in
I
writing.
don't believe that the iPhone records.
I've never heard of an iPhone that didn't, so I would love to see any of it. Ms. Leah, I don't want to put the burden on you to have to answer for this.
Okay.
I'm just asking for an information request.
Okay, your motion is to request all information
From
the manufacturer.
regarding the interaction between iPhones and body-worn cameras. And my understanding is that that happens during the office. I think what was explained to us was that there was a day-long period when officers would be able to access the footage after they had submitted it and returned their body camera, that they still could view on their iPhone that footage. That's what I thought I
That
understood.
wasn't my understanding, that everything was wiped out.
Maybe Lieutenant Files can.
I'm not aware what you're referring to.
I think that's why
Sorry,
we need
just-
that's why we need the general order in front of us before we make.
I
See,
just want to
Lieutenant
unpause
doesn't
this.
even know, they were really
Was
in
that a
trouble.
motion?
Sorry?
Was that
Matt,
a
never tried to
motion?
cloud the issue, we simply don't have the document. That's-
Okay.
Yeah,
So
neither do we.
Yes,
I have
Ms. Lee.
motion to request all information from the manufacturer regarding the interaction between iPhones and body-worn cameras, and I think you said more.
And the ability of officers to access it, to access footage.
Well, that's gonna be in the policy.
No, I'm asking for how the physical hardware, how it actually works. And as well as the policy, of course I want the policy.
So,
I wanna read about when they say,
Yeah, sorry, I want to limit discussion for a second and ask if there's a second on this motion.
I haven't even
Well,
finished
he
the
hasn't-
motion.
She hasn't finished the motion, right.
So I'm trying to be very specific in what we're asking for. So I'm asking for how does, when Axon is marketing this to a police department, how do they explain how the iPhone and the body-worn camera work together?
Okay.
What the capabilities
We're
are?
asking the BPD to tell us what Axon.
I would hope they would have that information. If they don't, I'm especially worried. Because we could ask the manufacturer directly, or we could ask the police department what information has been provided to them.
Okay, so far I have motion to request all information from the manufacturer regarding the interaction between the iPhones and the body-worn cameras. There's a second part of that I
Yes,
still
ma'am.
haven't gotten.
All information about recordings made by officers. What policies, protocols, instructions have been given to officers to help them understand how to manage recordings that they make on personal devices, as was described by Lieutenant Files. So either on personal or department-issued devices, and how those recordings are accounted for.
Okay.
Is that-
Now we need a second.
Yes, is there a second on the motion?
I will second it.
Second, all right. Now it's open for discussion on the motion. Yes, Mr. Roberts?
Yeah, I actually think doing this is premature. And I think we should get the policy, see what it says about the recordings in the iPhones, And then if we still have concerns, we can more fashion a specific issue about it. For example, the policy could say, you know, the iPhone can only be used for viewing the footage, for example. And that it couldn't be used for recording or something like that. So I think we're better off to get the policy, look at the policy, see where this fits in, and then have a discussion of the policy. And if this motion doesn't pass, I would be wanting to put a motion on that as soon as the PRC officer gets the policy, that be scheduled for the next agenda to discuss the policy. That's not a motion at the moment, but that's what
Yeah,
I
we need a motion for that.
Commissioner Sherman.
I don't think it's premature at this point in time, Terry, to have a motion like this, letting the police department know tonight some of our concerns that are going to be in the process of developing a policy. So I don't think it's premature, just letting them know in advance what some of our concerns are, and we'd like to see them addressed in the policy rather than get the policy and have to do this all over.
Policy's done.
Commissioner Ramsey.
It just seems, I mean, I would agree with Commissioner Robertson. It's pretty sure, this is not just saying, hey, these are areas of concern we've had. I think those have been voiced just in giving notice right now. These are specific requests for information to get the police department to go back and dig up documents or reach out to manufacturers. It seems like it's premature until we actually see the policy.
If
Can
they
I
bring
offer
the
a friendly amendment to
Yes.
this one? So I would propose that we ask the police department, we're gonna get the policy in 2 days, I understand, that together with providing the policy, we receive information about the workings and coordination of the iPhone and the cameras, and also the operating instructions, the operating and handling instructions that officers be given when they roll out these cameras. In other words, it's one thing to have a formal policy, but it's another to understand what operating instructions police officers have been given to utilize these things. I assume that there's a document that somewhere, 2 or 3 page document, in which officers are told, you know, the details of it. So I would like to ask that in addition to receiving the formal policy, that we also get this other information of 2 sorts. The
And you offer
information.
that as a friendly amendment, Commissioner?
Yes,
Is
it's a
that
friendly
an
amendment.
addition or a
It's
substitution?
it's a substitution.
So that's an alternative
So
proposal.
a substitute motion?
It's a substitute.
I guess it's a friendly substitute motion.
I appreciate it. I feel friendly towards you as well, but I don't think that's how Robert's.
Is there a
Well,
second on the
is it
substitute?
accurately a substitute
I
motion or friendly
agree
amendment?
that this is information that we need, and that it should come together as a package, because being someone who studies law and policy, I know it's one thing to get the formal policy, and it's another to get the operating instructions.
So if I may clarify this, if I may. So what you're saying is, and I think you're actually doing the right motion with the right wording, that in addition to the submission of the finalized order on body-worn cameras, the department supplies all the specs of the interface of the phone with the body-worn cameras and any all possibility and any and all interfaces in which additional video can be seen, documented, recorded, and what are the steps taken for that information to be recorded, reviewed, and cataloged. That's pretty much what you're saying, that in addition to the general order, all this information was given at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know that it has to be that specific about that, but I just think the operating manual or whatever, the instructions for how to use this thing and handle it, yeah.
I'll second that motion.
So just
That
to be
makes more
clear,
sense to
that
me.
was a substitute motion?
Yes.
Okay, and we
That
have a
makes
second
more
on the
sense to me.
substitute motion?
Did you get up, which substitute motion is it?
Yes,
Which,
just leave.
because it seems like there's 2, I'm not sure.
No, I'll second her substitute motion. That in addition to the general order is being brought to the commission, all the operational specs of the
The operational specs having to do with the interface between the iPhone and the camera, but also the instructions given to officers as to how to operate and handle this thing.
But see, the concern with that addition is like no instructions have been given
because the cameras are not being rolled out, because the general orders are being rolled out. They have a phone, but we're not rolling out the specs and the direction and conditions by which it needs to be used with a body worn camera.
Well, whatever
Again,
specs are,
cart horse.
whatever specs are now available. I'm sure there's some, draft.
Yes, Commissioner.
Just to clarify though, my understanding is that they've already done the meet and confer, that they're ready to roll it out. So I don't get the premature part of any of this. I actually feel like the horse has kind of left
It's
the
coming
barn.
in a couple of days, yeah.
So I don't get why anybody's saying any of this is premature. I think we're late. So, and I also don't see, even if it was potentially premature, even if it was premature, what's the harm, commissioners? It's information.
I withdraw my second.
I think it's out of context, the way you were describing it.
Help me, I don't know, I don't understand.
Yeah.
So, there is a
Has my
substitute motion.
substitute survived?
There's a substitute motion on the
No,
floor
you
with
withdrew
no
a second.
second. Is there, he withdrew a second. Is there another second for Commissioner Calavita's substitute motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Okay, so now discussion is still on the substitute motion. Is there any further discussion about this motion?
It's on the substitute motion?
Yes.
So before we vote, me being very technically challenged, what the hell's the difference between the two?
Ms. Lee, would you please read both?
What's the difference between the two? Are we talking
The two
the new,
what?
Between the two
the
proposals.
original motion of Andreas and yours? What does
Oh,
yours?
Ms. Lee's gonna
I
read
think
the
I was
wording.
just asking, that it be, submitted to us together with the proposal.
My understanding is that the difference is you're asking for the user manual and specs on the actual body cameras. Quite frankly, you can look up the user manuals online.
I'm not so much
But-
interested in the user manual. I want to know the instructions that the officers have been given to implement this thing.
And any sort of training.
And any
or-
sort of training,
or
manuals,
instructions
I
that-
assume that, yeah.
So I seconded that.
Wait, you second her motion?
I seconded Commissioner Calavita's
Oh, okay.
motion. Did not second Commissioner Pritchett's. I think that Commissioner Pritchett's is just too broad at this point. I think we're getting into topics that quite frankly were handled by the subcommittee before. And that's where they should have been done. We gave our input to the police department. Now we're gonna get back a final proposal. We'll be able to take a look at that, and then you can make some narrowly tailored requests for information that are appropriate. So that's why I think it's premature, because we haven't seen the final policy. It was either, should have been done before in the subcommittee, or in stage 2 is after we see the final policy. So I'm fine with saying, okay, there's this information about that relates to how the policy is being implemented, essentially, which is what Commissioner Calavita's request seems to do, and that seems to be narrowly tailored to actually evaluating the final policy first. I would prefer that to this sort of generalized request for any information that the police department has regarding the use of how iPhones interface with the body worn camera, which to me doesn't seem to be, at this point, necessary to evaluate the overall general order that's being implemented.
Yeah, we're getting a policy, I understand, in a couple of days. The implementation is gonna be rolled out in, what, about 3.5 weeks? I just throw this out as a rhetorical question. Once something like that happens and a policy that goes into effect without some of the information contained in both these resolutions, how difficult would it be to go back and reverse a lot of that stuff? In other words, should we be doing this, maybe throw in a request that the implementation be delayed, that the rollout be delayed until these questions are answered? Because if they're being trained in exactly how to proceed under whatever training doctrines and policy, then what's the point of them being trained if we're gonna come up with this and say, no, this is not right, you need to do this over again? So maybe somewhere we should think about asking them for a delay in the rollout of this before all these issues get resolved, rather than have it rolled out and have it redone again or something? That's a rhetorical question, I'm just throwing that out.
No, I wouldn't say that. I think that, only if we see such major problems with the policy that we're getting in 2 days, I understand.
Yeah.
2 or 3 days. If there's then maybe a
Well,
delay.
some of the problems might be the one that you're talking about. We're not gonna find that out in 2 days. Either
Yes, that's what I'm,
either the
but
resolution.
my motion is asking that they submit whatever training instructions and implementation instructions they have given their officers together with the formal policy.
And what's your timeline?
What?
What's your timeline?
Together with the formal policy, now, 3 days.
Would you be able to do that?
I'm sitting here wondering, listening to this conversation.
Well, I mean,
and
I
do not
assume,
know.
if there aren't any,
As
there
soon
aren't.
as soon as possible.
As soon as possible would be something I would
But I
speak
know
to.
that the implementation is more important than the formal policy. I wanna see both.
Okay,
Commissioner Pritchett.
okay.
I want to say that, yes, I support your motion, and I appreciate the specificity of it, and I was touching on a different issue, you're right, Commissioner Ramsey, in my mind, the overarching issue is about how information is gathered, archived, curated, and distributed. In my mind, that includes body-worn cameras and, recordings that are made without the knowledge of the public, as opposed to a body-worn camera, which somebody has a reasonable chance of realizing that they're being recorded. I would like that all to be one happy stream. I would like that all to be together so that the public has a reasonable chance of making Public Records Act requests and accessing that information. Those are public records. If there's some special permission or some special investigation which makes that, confidential or not subject to Public Records Act request, great. What I want to avoid is, what can I say, the selective distribution of information, as I believe has been happening recently in our city. So, yes, I was talking about recordings made via personal devices. I will support Commissioner Calavita's measure, and actually, in honesty, I support Commissioner Sherman's rhetorical question. I think that once the horse is out of the barn, it's going to be very hard to go back and do all these adjustments, but we'll see.
Ms. Lee, would you mind reading back the substitute motion?
Sure. I have to ask the BPD to supply, together with the body-worn camera policy, information on the operational specifications regarding how the iPhones and body-worn cameras work together. Did I get that right?
Interface.
That doesn't make sense.
Interface.
And
Information about the interface between the iPhone and the camera.
And archive.
And the operating or training or implementation instructions or manuals that the officers are being given, and to supply this information as soon as possible.
In the interest of time, I would like to call this motion to a vote. Is there any last discussion? All right. All in favor of the substitute motion? Do I have a roll call?
This is the substitute?
Yes.
Yes. All in favor? Okay. Is that unanimous?
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. We will now move on to Commissioner Pritchett's motion. Ms. Lee, would you please also read that motion?
I think in the case of a
No, no,
substitute.
that's fine.
Yeah, it's substitute.
It's already over, Robert.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
The original motion fails.
Okay.
Motion passes.
Are we ready to move on from this item? So
Yes.
we can motion? Yes, okay. Moving on to item 9C. Commissioner Pritchett, this is also your item.
Some of this has become moot because of last night's city council vote. It might be wise for commissioners to take a look at what was distributed by, Ms. Lee. Front page of your packet. We were provided with an after-action report in our last packet. I have an interest in And again, I view the role here, our role here, to be one of monitoring whether or not general orders are being followed, whether or not, and the degree to which they're being followed. And that is why last time I tried to make a request for whatever forms are being used to inventory munitions that are brought into our city from outside agencies. One of the recommendations of the Black Lives Matter investigation and the recommendations was that an inventory of all munitions should be made prior to and after mutual aid forces are brought into our city. I wanted to make a request for any documents that demonstrate how that is being followed, how those inventories are occurring. In the after-action report, we were provided with a summary. I'm asking for copies of the original inventory sheets. And I'm asking for how those inventories are happening. Other issues. A man last night at the city council testified that, yes, he did bring a sound truck to the protest at Ohlone Park. He said that it was confiscated almost immediately, and he was arrested. My question in that regard is, was that an escalation strategy or a de-escalation strategy on the part of the police? I've had some, when we use the term de-escalation, sometimes I think we don't differentiate between an individual who is escalated, i.e. someone with a mental health disability, and how that person is de-escalated. But that's very different than de-escalation strategies with a crowd, in a crowd control situation. So, I believe there are some issues to consider about how that incident went down on the 5th that go even beyond the doxing.
Commissioner? Before you get to, I guess, C3, one, are you going to do anything about, are you going to request us to do anything about C1 again? And number two, C2, if we're going to get into, if you wish to initiate a broader discussion of escalation versus de-escalation, and it's sort of, there's an overlap for me into item 3, then I think we also need to have a political discussion about the role of not just the Berkeley police, but the Highway Patrol, Sacramento, Charlottesville, and DC police making anti-fascists the enemy and not the real enemy. So we're going to, that's a lengthy discussion I'd be willing to have. Maybe we should have, maybe it's past time now, but I don't know if we have the time to do it tonight. But I would like to, if we want to have, if you're thinking of getting into this whole election of escalation versus who, de-escalate for who, I have serious problems, not only with the pictures, but what they were arrested for in the first place. And to me, a lot of those were political arrests. Had nothing to do with weapons. We know that. In many cases, these were political arrests. So, that might overlap into 3 too. So I know the chair, in the interest of time, I don't know if we want to put this over later, but I think 2 and 3, the thoughts and comments I have, particularly on C 2 and 3, are a much more lengthy discussion we may have the time for tonight. So I would be happy if this could be, this is not going to go away, put off for future discussion and let it. We have to deal with Lexipol tonight. Are we under a time thing for that? We need to deal with Lexipol. But this is a lengthy discussion, and I have a lot I want to say. So anyway, I just pass that on to Commissioner.
Well,
Giovanni.
then, all right, in the interest of time, then, I'm happy to put this over, and Commissioner, I welcome your input on it, your framing of the issue. In the meantime, I would simply like to request, copies of the original inventory forms. I'd like, were they taken, or were they not? Were inventories of munitions taken?
So you, just clarify, you'd be willing to put C2 and C3 carried over and just deal with C1 tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, C1, we were provided with an after-action
No, I know
report.
that, but just.
But
I'm
this
not
is
saying
sort of
let's
like an
just
extension of that, I get it.
Focus on C1 tonight and
Yeah.
carry over 2 and 3 for future discussion, I think is
Yeah.
really important.
So
It
that
was
was
addressed by city council last night, I don't know whether that's still relevant.
Hey?
The mug shot situation was addressed last night.
Not to me it wasn't.
Oh,
He's
In
talking
other
about
words-
reviewing
in other
the
words,
policies.
Commissioner,
okay.
you're correct, but not the politics of why it all came down the way it did in the first place.
Okay.
Okay, so was that a motion?
So I have a proposal, yes, so the proposal is to request copies of the inventory forms that are required, that were required on August 5th, prior to and after the action. Okay. So my understanding is that that includes mutual aid forces.
Is that the entire motion?
The entire motion.
All right, is there a second on the motion?
I guess I don't understand, you know, we've been given the inventory forms in the after-action report.
These are not forms, these are summaries. And there are allegations that there were other,
Do we even know that
Munitions.
anything else exists? I mean, what makes you think?
Lieutenant Files can verify how those inventories are taken.
Ma'am, I wasn't there.
So he wasn't there. So I'd like to see,
I guess I need to know what your motivation is for this before I can second such a thing. I don't understand. why you're
during the
voting.
Black Lives Matter protests, what can I say, there's ample videotape, what we were told, that the BPD had exhausted its inventory of gas and munitions, and that and that other departments came in and were just kind of freely shooting munitions into the crowd through the gas. What I'm asking is, what steps is our department taking? We were told that the policy is that they would inventory, so presumably somebody goes and says, hey, Hayward, thank you so much for coming. What munitions are you bringing today? And that they would write down somewhere or somehow account for what we're bringing: pepper spray, we're bringing tear gas, we're bringing rubber bullets, we're bringing these. What controls are there on what is shot at crowds?
Point of information, we don't have control over Haywood. We have the only department, this is a question. The only department that we have an interaction with, control over, work with, is the Berkeley Police Department. Are you asking in your resolution, clarifying it to me, that you would like to see an inventory of all the munitions that all the other forces brought, well, hold on, two-part. One, brought in, and secondly, do we even have the authority to ask that?
One of the recommendations that resulted from the Black Lives Matter
He wasn't here.
investigation was that BPD said, one of the reasons why so much stuff got shot, we can't tell you what was shot.
Yeah, I remember.
At the
all that.
crowd.
I remember all that.
So one way to repair that damage, they said, was that we will inventory before.
Who's we? The Berkeley Police?
BPD, who
Okay,
is making
BPD.
that mutual aid request.
They're gonna inventory everybody.
Right.
They
If
agree.
if we invite 100 officers here, we're gonna,
Oh, okay.
so I'm trying to find out, are we
Yeah.
doing that?
Oh, okay.
Is that actually
I got you.
happening?
Okay.
And so I want any kind of evidence of how they do that and what forms they're using and is it happening?
So just for my clarity, out of Black Lives Matter, agreement was made that we would get, if we're looking at here, I assume it's just inventory of BPD, that we would get a complete inventory of all the force under mutual aid, what they brought in and what they left with. I second your motion.
Yes.
Is the motion that you want the inventory, or you wanna know if they're doing it?
All I want is just a copy of the documents that have been used to conduct the inventory.
From all the police departments, for all the
Correct.
outside agencies.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, is there any more discussion on this motion? I actually have a question for you, Lieutenant Files.
Yes.
How difficult would it be to get this inventory report?
As I listen to this conversation, I'm thinking of the check-in procedures when you go to mutual aid. What? I said, as I listen to this conversation, I'm thinking on the check-in procedures for when you go to mutual aid, which I've done many times. You take a roster with you of your resources. I have X amount of cops, and we have this equipment. And you turn that in. Where it goes after that, I could not answer with specificity. I don't know how long it's archived for. I don't know where it's held, but I do know that you do have an inventory of what you have arrived with and what you bring.
On a mutual aid response, like if you go to
If
San
Oakland,
Leandro or something, you do the same thing? And
yes, I fill out a 211 form and a 214 form.
give it
I'm
to
being
San
nerdy,
Leandro?
But
Or you give it to?
I go out and I fill it out saying, I'm Lieutenant Files, I have a squad of X amount of officers and so many sergeants, and I have this equipment with me.
Where does that go to?
That's what I just said, sir. I'm not sure. You turn it in when you check in. There's a command post.
To who?
You turn it into whoever's running the organization.
Incident commander or-
So, right, the incident commander or whomever, you turn it into that check-in, that designee, that check-in point, and it goes to someplace other. I go to the field and we go do what we do.
Do you know if it's commonplace that the other departments are doing the same thing?
I know that it's part of the ICS protocol, meaning that we all work under that incident command structure. So yes, we should all.
I see, okay.
Thank you, that was very helpful. Is there any more discussion before I call this to a vote?
Yes, is this not then a summary of all of that check-in information? This inventory.
Which page are you on, ma'am?
Page 19.
19. So all of that information goes somewhere, you don't know where, but it gets,
Oh, yes.
it
Okay.
gets aggregated like this.
This is what this picture is asking for.
Well,
Now, is this
she wanted
all
the
the
raw
police
data.
or just Berkeley?
Again, I'm willing to, that would be speculative, so I don't wanna do that. But this would not be enough for everybody, however many agencies show up. This looks to be a localized inventory.
Of the BP.
Correct. And I say that with a bit of trepidation because I'm not seeing it listed as BPD, but just the sheer quantity tells me this is not a lot of people.
Yeah, so that's all I wanted to check is how are we managing this?
Well, I would say that you have the information you're requesting in front of you, if I'm understanding your request.
I'm interested in the 211 forms.
Okay, but I
I
don't
want
know that,
original, some people like original documents.
that may not be available, I don't know, we'll find out.
Okay, I would like to call this to a vote then. Ms. Lee, would you please take roll?
Calavita? Yes. Matthews?
Yes.
Ellis?
No.
Pritchett?
Yes.
Ramsey?
No.
Roberts?
No,
Sherman?
Yes.
The motion passes 4-3.
Okay. And then you decided to.
Yeah, and we'll just,
The next
yeah,
meeting.
I'll,
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to 10A, the Lexipol policies from the Lexipol subcommittee.
Fall asleep.
So folks, what you have in front of you is on item 10, new business A, is 3 sets of general orders. And this, Mr. Ramsey, feel free to jump in here if you please were collaborative subcommittee. You have 3 sets of policies here. One is Lexipol from that changed from general order. And that means that, some changes were on this ones. No change from general order means that it was a complete and transference from the original general order into Lexipol formatting. And the new, the corresponding general order was general orders that did not exist in the Lexipol that were moved from our general orders into a Lexipol formatting. I don't know if that complicates it. Does that make sense to you folks?
Sorry, could you clarify this? So these are not Lexipol's policies, but our policies that we put in a Lexipol format?
That's, yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's correct. So on the first one are general orders that we changed from original general order to our Lexipol. Some of them have some changes, some of them didn't have some changes, right? For example, 308, which is canine, it's something that doesn't exist in Lexipol, but that it exists from us, from our city council resolution. Let's just like Lexipol, okay? But we transferred information based on the resolution from city council into these general order. The number 2 are general orders that are no changes at all. They were reviewed, but there were no changes made to any of the wording. It just moved from the original general order of the language straight into just a formatting. And number 3 are general orders that we have in existence. I'm confused here. Yeah, no corresponding general order.
There is no general order.
There's a general order now. Go ahead. These were the ones that were policy training, administrative things that we put into a general order format.
Were you talking about group 3?
Yes.
There's no, these are new.
There was no corresponding general order.
There was no corresponding. We didn't have a general order.
The Lexipol policies have been added, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, number 1 is, change from general order?
It's a general order that we had, that we compared to the Lexipol general order to make sure that the spirit of the general order that we had in Berkeley matched with the wording of Lexipol. So when it changed from our general order to a Lexipol formatting, that the spirit of the general order was the same. That's number 1. Number 2 is general orders that there was no change. We just took the general order, put it on the formatting. Lexipol didn't have any influence there. And the third one is general orders that didn't exist. Lactation, smoking, tobacco use, seat belts, meal periods and breaks, lactation break policy, payroll record procedures, which are more administrative, operational orders, more than anything else, right? What are the rules and regulations that dictate lactation break policy for police officers who need to take the time to lactate, right? What is smoking and tobacco use? What are the rules for seat belts? What are the emergency utility service, aircraft accidents? Stuff like that they had a general order, we did not, but it was mostly non-controversial, thank you, sir.
So are we gonna go through each one of your recommendations?
Well, our recommendation is that as it relates to number 2 and number 3, it's straightforward. Because on number 2, there's no change of the general order as it exists right now. We're not gonna revisit
Right,
any
so I
single
meant
general order.
in the first group, the ones where you have recommendations.
That, Ms. Lee, I'm on the understanding that the members of the commission received, the Lexipol orders for all of
Yes,
them?
yes, they got
So,
it.
so they should have been able, to review them, right?
Yep.
So our recommendation is that in relation to number 2 and number 3, there should be an automatic pass. If the commissioners have any questions on Lexipol on the group number 1, this is the time to bring them up. So there was an.
And I should say, the subcommittee recommended, all the ones that we moved to the commission, these were ones that we were recommending that we were recommending be adopted, or that we didn't have we didn't have an issue with. There are several that over time that we have marked and held out and not forwarded to the commission yet that were, and had maybe more, or had some more issues that were still, there might be some controversy. So, and we should say, the police department is trying to roll these out, starting to roll them out, so we wanted to try to give some that we had reviewed and we thought were acceptable, so that we could have the whole commission review them, so that if the police have them, then they could still start to roll out their whatever it was, 10 to 20 at a time.
So are you saying that all of the ones in category 3 seem to you all to be non-controversial?
Yes, we thought they were acceptable.
2 and 3, yes.
We thought all 3 categories were acceptable, but category 2, there clearly was no issue because they were already
Right.
current policies that were in
Right, but
effect.
these new ones.
The new ones were new ones that were recommended by Lexipol
Right.
that we did not find controversial and we thought were acceptable as well. And then, if you go back to the first category, those were ones that,
Right.
when you look at the original Lexipol policy, there were changes made, significant redline changes. We tried to incorporate
Yeah.
the Berkeley general orders that are currently in effect. We reviewed those, we had some back and forth, but with the police department and why changes were made, what was left out, what wasn't, we had some questions, but these were ones that we felt were acceptable at the end of the day. There are several others that we still have questions on, that we're waiting for information, that we pulled out and we have not forwarded to the commission.
So do you want us to vote on these where you have recommendations?
We're voting on the whole.
The whole
thing,
packet, we
right?
think you should vote on, I say all 3 categories.
The changes that you'd like to see made.
No, we are asking the commissioners that when they get them, to review them, to do due diligence like we did.
I did.
Well, I'm just
Yeah.
particularly general, right? And not individually. And then, if they have any concerns as a comparative, to bring them for the discussion individually. But the subcommittee is recommending to the commission full passage of all the 3 sections.
I'm confused on the first section. You've recommended some changes to the wording.
No.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, on the first section, there were some changes in wording that we saw because of the Lexipol formatting to the original formatting. We asked questions and clarification. So,
Yes, I understand. Let's look at the first one first, 100.2.
Sure, so what are your concerns on that one?
I have no concerns. I'm just
Ah.
interested in what we're supposed, I agree with subcommittee. I think we should go the way the subcommittee proposed. Are we not going to vote on, or we're not going to say, what are we going to do with that?
Yeah, so we were gonna move, or I would move that we recommend that all of these be adopted by the police department.
As the subcommittee has changed some wording.
But we did, on these, we did not change wording, even on the first, the changes, so that you understand the changes. For the first category, it started with Lexipol policy, right, sort of model policies. The police department itself took it upon it to go through each of those policies and compare them to the corresponding Berkeley general order that is currently in effect. The police department then edited the Lexipol policies to reflect the general policies that were currently in effect. So, as a subcommittee, we reviewed all of those edits
Right.
to make sure that we believe that they actually and accurately reflected the Berkeley general orders that were currently in place, or that there was a compelling reason for a change. So, for example, a change in the law. Like Lexipol had identified some sort of case law or statute that needed to be complied with.
Can we just look at this specific case of number 1?
Sure.
Can I let Commissioner Pritchard and Commissioner Roberts have a say first?
I'm just unclear about what process we're gonna use. This is a mighty fat packet. And in honesty, I have not been able to get through the whole thing. I have not been able to get through it. I didn't get it until some days ago, and haven't been able to do due diligence. I also am not sure what kind of input from the public we're looking for.
Well,
And how we might offer them an opportunity.
well, the public's had a full opportunity because we posted all of these on the website for the subcommittee meetings, at least identified.
They haven't been posted. I didn't have support staff to do that.
No,
Okay.
but the meetings have been posted as public meetings, and that the discussion was
And
going
we've
to happen on the
identified
next
the
call.
policies that we were gonna be reviewing. We've not reviewed any policy without it being put on a subcommittee agenda before we had the
Right, the
discussion.
agenda has,
And the policy, and the subcommittee member meeting, I mean, one of the meetings we held, for example, right before this meeting here today, between 5:30 and 7 o'clock, we were sitting here doing a subcommittee meeting. So they're fully open to the public. Anyone who wanted to come could come and get whatever input they wanted.
I want to give Commissioner Roberts a chance to say what you have to say. Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody's work here. You guys really worked hard to get this far, for God's sake. I was going through them today, and it's a lot of information. Kind of my take on it at the moment, 'cause I've been through, I'd say 90% of them, not all. But, you know, I definitely would support going with number 2. But I have questions on number 1 and number 3, various questions on specific ones, not all of them. And some of them could be answered pretty quickly, and others may not. I don't know, it just depends. And, but what I also hear you saying is then you're not, on page 3 of the packet, you had some wording change, possible changes in there and all that. At this point, you're saying you're willing to go with Berkeley Police version rather than make those changes? Is that what I hear you saying?
That's what I don't understand.
Pardon?
That's what I've been asking. I don't understand what you want us to do with your
On
proposal.
page 3, which is of the bigger packet, it says recommendations of Lexipol Policy Subcommittee, September 26th. Looks like this.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Page 3 of the big
It's just
packet.
the very beginning, yeah.
Sorry, I'm just pulling. Go ahead.
So why are you referencing?
My question is that, the Subcom had taken some issues with these 3 particular Lexipol policies, or at least the amended ones that the BPD did. And so now, but I thought I heard one of you say that for other reasons, you're not necessarily asking us to make the changes you originally recommended,
Well,
and that you're willing to go with the BPD.
No, I'm sorry, we should submit it with those recommendations.
Oh, with those?
With those.
Well, that's what I
Okay,
was
so
I'm
you
sorry.
are recommending
I'm
these,
sorry.
they want those changes.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
So I guess that was what I was asking. Did you want us to concur with that or anything
Yes.
like that? Yeah, that's, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question, Mr. Calavera.
so anyway, just as a process matter, you know, for me again, I'm willing to go with number 2 as a group, but I'd prefer that we, at some point, be able to sort of go down a few of these and ask some questions about them on number 1 and number 3.
But to be clear, on Lexipol 201 and Lexipol 204, the chief came back to us with explanations that were satisfactory to the subcommittee to bypass those 2 recommendations. We were satisfied with the recommendation of the shall and the should in terms of the private use of the email. We were satisfied with the acceptance of special orders as a best practices, that it made sense. What we are waiting, it is on 100 law enforcement authority upon the subcommittee in my insistence that some of the wording be changed to the original general order wording. But I want to be clear too, that if you're looking at the original general order and you're looking at the Lexipol general order and you see the red markings, you're going to see that sometimes is mask instead of hood. It is some aspects of how the general order was written, that some aspects were taken out, but they are in another part of the general order in a much clearer form. That are delineated in a specific manner in which makes more sense. So when we look at the general orders, and to be honest, we tried the easy ones first. We went for the easy picking so that we would have something to give to the department that was not extremely controversial. What we found some controversy was in the first one of 100 in terms of that use of language to us as a mission and a vision that we articulated as important in how police officers use discretion. And the chief is having that one as a recommendation for his review. But most of the other concerns that we had was, why isn't this here? Oh, I see, it's in here. Okay, so in the general order was in paragraph 3, but now it's in paragraph 400.21. But it makes more sense there because it's better written. So we didn't have any substantial concerns because everything was written correctly. As it relates to number 3, in terms of the email, in the original general order it said shall, on the second one is used. The reason why that is because the explanation of the police department is, sometimes we send emails to each other about the birth of a baby, or somebody's anniversary wedding, and because they're not official business, or to be considered as such, but they're still, because of the usage of an email that is propagated and generated by the police department under the city auspices, they're still under the regulations of Public Information Act, right? Because they're emails that are used. There's no sense of privacy on those communications. So we said, okay, so that explains the should and the shall. In terms of the training orders, we wanted to make sure that the training order was not a general order because we moved away from training bulletins. There's no longer a training bulletins. So the training order specifically as it relates to the general orders, when you take to someone, we're going to assign this officer, and this officer to this Solano Stroll booth, or we're going to assign these 3 police officers to go to this community event. So those, even though it's a special order, it sounds different than what it is, and that was our concern. It is not a general order, it's not a training bulletin, it's not a special order as it relates to any changes to an existing general order. It's just, it's what is called, for the usage of a much different word, it's a special classification or a special assignment. So it's a special order assigning someone to do something different, not a special order. So that was explained to us, we saw how it worked, we moved on. So those are the only 2 things that we had problems with.
And what about the canine policies?
The canine policy.
I can speak to that, and
That's right.
I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you at the subcommittee meeting, but Captain Roleri realized it was, because it's a council policy, that they can't change that, so they're trying to stick with the council policy.
Okay.
So, just for process-wise, with the time check, if we do want to go through like specific policies, I would recommend that we go through group 2 first, because I feel like that might be the easiest to pass within this meeting, and then move on to 3 and then 1. Does anyone have a different type of recommendation? Or you can answer the canine policy.
But the canine policy is just city council. It's city council directive. We didn't touch it at all. But as an example, there was a Lexipol general order as a perfect example in the usage of helicopters during demonstrations or to use of helicopters, in which specifically Lexipol said that upon the recommendation of the chief of police, and would say, oh, hold a moment. The specific city council directive is city manager. City manager. So we change it to that. So that's what we're talking about in terms of language and changes.
Yeah.
Just what we did is we looked at the general order, the original general order, because remember, we're not here to have an individual evaluation of general orders one by one. If that's what we're gonna do, that's a much different subcommittee. If the commission wants to pull up a particular general order and create a subcommittee for its review, that's a much different process. What we're here is to see, this is the original general order, this is what Lexipol, how it's written, how does it compare, Just are there any changes that are drastic and it goes away from the intent of the general order, the community intent and city council? There's not, okay, that changes here. Okay, so it's not a hood, it's a mask. Great. It reads well, that changes according to the law, moving forward. That's what we did.
Okay, point of clarification.
Sure.
What authority do we have to, for example, I totally agree with the recommendation in 100.2. I see the department responded that they did that to avoid duplication. Suppose we want to go with the subcommittee's recommendation. Anyway, what is our authority to require that?
Well, so there's different things, right? So, because the explanation is that it's on the impartial, fair and impartial policing, we can certainly say, we're gonna pass 1, 2, and 3, we're gonna hold 100 until the chief come back to us with a more consistent reason why it shouldn't exist in both.
Yeah, but that's not my question. My question is really fundamental, and that is, the department can come back to us and explain why they prefer it this other way. Where does that leave us?
That leaves us that we've provided our input and the department can decide. If the city manager decides to overrule the department, then that can happen.
Okay,
And
so
if
when
we-
our mission says set and review policy, it's not to set policy, it's to make recommendations.
Is to participate in.
But at the same time, it's also what battle you pick, right?
Well, it's an essential question about what our jurisdiction is and what our authority is. It's not just about battles, because if in the end, we're betting a losing battle in terms of reviewing policy, I mean, we can make recommendations, but we don't have any ability to require anything, I guess, is my point.
Right.
That's why I say we're not
That's right.
regulatory. We're
I
not-
just wanna-
That's why I say we're not regulatory.
Sorry, I just want to stop that conversation right here because I feel like this is a huge ideological conversation that we've
No, it's not
had.
really ideological, it's a point, I
More
need to
about-
know.
It's a legal point, it's
Yeah,
statutory.
it's an
We do not
important
have,
point.
we do not have authority under the ordinance to require the police.
To impose. To impose. We don't have the ability to impose, but, so
Oh.
there is administrative, there's a recommendation process, there is always a political process. If we feel so strongly that this iPhone thing on the body worn camera, it's something that we are not gonna stick with and we don't like it at all, we take to city council. So there's a political aspect and a recommendation aspect to what we do.
That's good.
But
So-
it's the city manager who has the authority, and who has the authority over the city manager is the city council.
That's right.
Okay, but on these smaller disagreements here, that ultimately the department will decide, we'll make our recommendation and they'll decide.
Yeah, the recommendation is we'd like to have it here, the police department says it's here as well,
Yeah.
does that fulfill your recommendation? My question was, is that explicit in terms of a mission and a vision, as you relate to how you enforce and do law enforcement? They said if we're talking about fair and impartial, how to be fair and impartial when you apply the law, it's free here. It's for us to say, fine, I think it answers the question, but I like to see it in most places. Can we live with it? Can we live without it? Is it substantive? Is it just an addition that we like to see? Where does it fall?
Okay.
Okay, so in terms of process again, is everyone all right with starting with number 2, group number 2? Are there any questions or concerns about any of the Lexipol policies in this group? No?
Uh,
All right. Yes.
I would move that we approve, I guess, the recommendation of the subcom and move number 2 forward to formalize our position with BPD.
Okay, is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion about, this is just to clarify specifically about group number 2? Yes, okay, is there any discussion on this motion? If not, I'd like to take a vote. All in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. Miss Lee, did you get that?
I think I saw everybody except Commissioner Pritchett.
Yes. All opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you, so moved. Okay, moving on to group number 3. Is there any discussion on any of these items?
Which one now?
Group number 3.
Number
Yes,
3.
Commissioner Roberts.
I have questions on 5 items.
On number
The
3.
rest I'm okay with. How do you wanna handle it? You wanna like go through quickly or approve the ones and hold the other ones till later?
I
Kind
think
of thing.
we have time for you to ask your questions, and if they get into a deeper discussion, we may have to hold them over,
Okay.
but if there's simple questions.
So,
Quick question, sir. Come on, shoot, number 1.
hold on.
Well, first in order, what's the question, sir?
What,
First question in order, you have a question with, what's the question, sir? First in order, you have a concern about, what's the question?
yeah, well, no, my first one is, on page 193.
These are policy.
Yeah, it's 309.
309, office response to calls.
Yeah, just a quick question there.
What's the other page you're referencing?
Oh, wait a minute, 309.
It's
193. 193.
Actually, I don't have a question on that.
Okay.
So, my next one would be air support, 419. Policy 419, it's on page 209.
Order.
That's about after the electric bombs.
Yeah. So George, you mentioned about the helicopter, and I see that the Lexipol has taken out, I presume the crossouts are from the old policy, and,
No, that's not necessarily the case.
that's not true?
No, those may be crossouts from the Lexipol suggested policy.
Oh, the Lexipol suggested policy. What's the bottom line here? I mean, this is kind of a short policy on a kind of a hot issue.
Circumstances in which aid may be requested, police helicopters may be requested under any of the following conditions. City Council has only one condition. When a helicopter is needed to locate a person who has strayed or is lost and whose continued absence constitutes a serious health or safety hazard. That's it. That's the general order. Everything else, mark it in black. That's the only condition by which it can be used, per City
That's
Council
the only
directive.
condition it could be used.
In black, per City Council Resolution number 51.408.
Okay,
So that's an
And
example of
disaster
where
Right.
And disaster
Lexipol
assistance.
recommended
Yeah.
something that was inconsistent with Berkeley policy through the city council resolution. And so that language was stricken from the Lexipol policy.
okay, that answers my question. The other, I had a question on the next page 209, and that was smoking tobacco use. This is kind of a simple one, but,
211,
where am I?
page 211. Policy
211.
10009, page 211.
211, here we go.
Yes, sir.
Okay, this, okay, I don't have any questions about that. Okay, page 221, personal appearance and standards, 221.
221. That's policy 1023.
Is that 221?
Yeah.
Yeah.
221.
Policy 1023.
Okay, somehow my comment, my notes are not coming up here. There. do you know, is the cross-outs here, would that have been from the original, or would that have been from Lexipol?
That's from Lexipol.
Yeah.
Some Lexipol?
This whole policy started out as being from Lexipol, so anything underlined were additions that BPD put into the policy, and any strikeouts were portions of the Lexipol policy.
For example,
But essentially here, it's up to the chief to specify this?
yes, that's a paramilitary, military grooming standards are set. I say grooming standards for my employees, I have 100 of them.
But do they, are there more specific requirements? Because I see a lot of the most specific things are crossed out, and it kind of just leaves it to the chief to figure it out. I mean, is that kind of it?
So
'Cause a lot of the things that are specific are crossed out. And what's left is, unless the chief grants an exception.
Well, you know, I'll give you an example. Branding or scarification, if you are from Atlanta and you're an Omega, branding is part of your tattoo, and is an Omega sign is your arm. I have a lot of friends of mine that are Omegas. That's not a tattoo, it's a branding. So, I mean, that's something that the chief doesn't want to dwell in. Tattoos are not to be covered unless they're offensive. What the offensive will be determined by the department, but you are not going to hide your tattoos unless they're offensive, right? And offensive could be a myriad of things.
But that's up to the chief judgment?
But it's up to the moral and ethical norms of the community, right? If you say.
I'm just trying to understand how individual officers would relate to this.
Yes, I mean, this is
Like,
not.
like, what am I supposed to do
I was in the
here?
Air Force, you know, you got regulation 35-10, they tell you how long your
That's right.
sideburns can be, they can tell you how long your
Yeah.
your hair can be.
Right.
They've chosen.
But that's not in here.
Well, right, because do they wanna have that? They don't wanna have something so specific that tells you that your mustache can't be past the end of your lips. And, you know, so, I mean, they have chosen to have a broader, more discretion. Look, that is something that is in Air Force regulations about how you can dress and how you can groom yourself. So you can be incredibly specific, or you can be more general. The reality is they have decided that they wanna have a more general policy rather than just lay out, you know, where your gig line is.
Okay, I'll go with that.
I think that when they say professional in appearance, they're trying to figure it out, you're not gonna pierce your tongue to look like a snake. And having to say that might be too specific.
You know,
I mean, because that might not be considered professional in an organization like that.
yeah. No, my whole thing was that I wasn't questioning the chief. It was more like, well, do individual officers know what to expect and what their regulation is? Or is somebody gonna walk in one day and the chief says, nope, you know, that kind of thing.
So I've been here long enough to see a couple of police officers go from long Jesus style hair to short crop hair. So I mean,
No, I understand.
it doesn't preclude them from performing.
I don't have anything to do with the hair.
Can we
It could
move
be,
on to
you know,
some
it could be
important
whatever,
issues?
I don't know.
Well, what other?
Commissioner Roberts, do you have more questions?
Could be, like
another one?
I
Nazi
mean, this would be a
tattoo or
situation where if
something.
I
That
heard
would be offensive. That would be considered offensive.
Well, to some it would be,
If
but
I,
other.
if I heard the Police Officers Association complaining about this, then that'd be consent.
That's right.
Okay, and the last one I had is on, 223. Policy 1027. Does this have anything to do with the name tags? Or is this just, I didn't understand, this hasn't anything to do with where the name tag is worn or anything like that, does
Which
it?
1027 are you referring to, flat badge?
Pardon?
Which one are you referring to? The flat badge?
It says department badges.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
it would best be described as a flat badge is a badge that I have in my wallet, so that wherever I go, I can identify myself as a police officer.
So that's the only thing this applies to?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't just,
It
notice
didn't,
the
it's
badge on
not
my
really
chest is-
specific in here. I see it did talk about flat badges, but it wasn't really specific as that was all it was about. So that was my only question.
Wait until the department is starting to get into ribbons as well, moving forward. Wait until we get into the ribbons, you know.
Yeah, okay. All right, that's all I had. The rest, I'm okay with it.
So are you making a motion, or does anyone else?
Somebody else might have questions.
Does anybody have any other questions about that?
No,
Number 3.
no.
So Mr., since you brought us here, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd make a motion that we move forward with the subcommittee's recommendation on item number 3 and transmit our recommendation to BPD.
I'll second that.
All right, is there any further discussion on the motion? If
Who was
not,
the seconder? I didn't hear.
thank you. Okay, all in favor, please raise your hands. All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so, Ms. Lee, do we have to end at 9:30 or do we have?
We have to have public comment before we can go into closed session.
Oh, yes, okay. So if it's all right with the commission, I'm going to ask that we end our discussion now and come back to number 1 next meeting. Yes.
Just, it's a point of personal privilege, what it is, but, there was an offer made to us regarding body worn cameras. Jim Shannon, who's been, one of the attorneys who's been working with John Burris to implement the consent decree in Oakland, has offered to come and, speak with us about the body worn cameras. So I don't know, I wonder if we could agendize that for the next meeting.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that the body worn cameras is on the next agenda.
What's the idea that speak to us about what
That we might be able to.
Holistically body worn cameras or what? Specifically what?
The issue
I
around.
mean, we have a specific make and model and all that.
Correct.
So-
Policies related to the handling of information and how they're handling the iPhone. Separation of witness issues and, policies related to how they handle, body worn camera footage and officer access to that information. You don't look happy about that.
If you would like to agenda.
No, I'll tell you why, because we've already been through this locally. And our work product is, I mean, you could read it if you want, it was our proposal. There were some changes that were still hanging out there that we still were kind of fighting for. So that's why we're anxious to see the policy come back, to see if
We have one more.
But all these trade-offs in terms of discussion about how things would be handled and the procedures and all that, were all had.
This is not on the agenda.
So I don't think.
This discussion is not on the agenda, it's completely out of order.
Okay.
So if you would like to agenda that,
But I have to warn the commissioners by make sure that we have 6 items that we didn't address today, plus number 1, plus another 10 general orders that are coming your way for review. So maybe the next commission meeting should be leftover business plus a little bit of new business only.
Yes,
Right.
Chair, my concern is if we invite Mr. Shannon to come, that he may never get the opportunity to speak, given all these items
Yeah.
on the agenda. So,
We could make something time certain.
So,
we could make it for a time certain, that means everything else, it means that gets put ahead in priority, and
I think that this is a conversation the chair and the PRC and Ms. Bridget can have. It's not on the agenda, so I'm not happy with this conversation as it continues. I think the chair and I would like to move to item 9E, and then go into closed session.
if that's all right with the commission, we can quickly discuss item 9E. This was brought up by Commissioner Sherman.
By mistake, but I'll accept it. Well, because, no, just to clarify, when we were getting a report about it, it happened when I was out of town, and I had no idea what it was on. So I suggested we put it, on the agenda, so I could basically learn about it, but then I learned about it as we went on, so I don't have anything to offer in the way of a resolution or anything on this item.
Is there anybody who would like to make a motion on this item?
Did you want to make a commendation for Officer Stephanie Cole and her actions?
I don't really know what they were. I don't have enough information, honestly. Number 1. Number 2, and I mean, I'm not completely ignorant of it. I did read, I think it was Berkeley side. I don't know how much information I did read.
You can ask him, he's sitting right there.
Well, wait.
In the files.
But the way I'm looking at this, I'm speculating now myself, there may or may not be political issues involved with this. There may be people here, in all due respect, that have a political position on this other than just a recommendation. But beyond that, I think it would be very, very dangerous, very, very wrong for the commission to get into start recommending officers every time there's a traffic stop.
I think we
Where
need
do
to-
we stop?
I think
Or every time there's an interaction with a
Yeah.
citizen, somebody sees the street, oh yeah, you know, and then have to sort, and of course, there is a political element. So I would not recommend, and I'm not saying she didn't act properly, I clearly understand that. I'm not saying that at all. I just don't think that the commission can start, you know, recommending.
So you're withdrawing your
Is
item
there
from
no
the
motion?
agenda?
No,
So-
no motion.
So you're withdrawing your item from the agenda?
Yeah, but I thought an explanation was necessary. Yes, I am.
Okay, so, item 10E is withdrawn from the agenda. Okay, we will now move on to public comment. Is there any closing, yes, please.
My name is Wilson Bates. I've been a police critic for a while now, and I don't intend to stop. I will say, though, that one of the things that I'm curious about, and it might have been mentioned before I got here tonight, but the less lethal weapons. One thing I've noticed in my role, both as a member of Berkeley Cop Watch for the last 21 years, and for the last 4 years also, in addition to cop watching, being a legal observer for the National Lawyers Guild. One of the things I've noticed we constantly critique and criticize the police for is when less lethal weapons carriers show up wearing the vests that carry the ammunition to those, most of the time the name and badge number is not visible. Now, state law requires that the name and or badge number be visible. I've had officers tell me, well, it's in the back of my helmet. And there's a skirmish line of cops, and I think his implication was, go around and get my number from the back. Yeah, right, I'm gonna walk through a police line to get the number. I think I know a little bit better than that. Also on is inventory taken regularly on less lethal weapons? Is it done daily, weekly, monthly? And who keeps the records for that? The iPhones, this might have been mentioned before I got here. The iPhones, was that omitted on purpose, that the iPhones were gonna come with body-worn cameras? Because I don't remember hearing anything about the iPhones when the body-worn camera issue was being discussed. Now, is that lying by omission? I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. Okay. Also, when you're asking for specifications for the iPhones in conjunction with the body-worn cameras, be sure to ask for the ability to get the updates that they issue regularly. Okay, August 5th, I was at Bellow Park as a legal observer and saw the truck being confiscated, the people arrested merely for being there. It was the weirdest day that I've experienced cop watching and legal observing. I was forced to the ground by Lieutenant Reese, who I've had interactions with over the years, who seems to very much enjoy shoving around older people. I do cop watching. I carry a video camera with me and a phone with me, which helps keep me on a community-minded basis to watch and interact with people who are being brutalized, harassed, beaten by the police. I'm going to continue to do that. I'm only 71. I'm not done yet. You're going to be seeing me around for a while.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to cut you off there, your time has elapsed.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll
Thank
do
you.
that.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment?
There is. In view of the withdrawal of item 10E from the agenda and in reaction to some comments that were made. My recommendation for this had nothing to do with politics. It had everything to do with the fact that this department needs an example of fair and impartial policing, which I heard on that recording. We have a policy of fair and impartial policing, have had for, is it 2 or 4 years? And I don't hear a lot of examples, see a lot of examples of it. And the tone of voice on that recording told me, one, I don't want to mess with this officer, but two, this is somebody who is on the task that the people of Berkeley have given to her. And if we cannot recognize that when it happens, then it feels to me like you have a paper policy. And that's great, but you know what? It's not enough. It's got to live out there in the world, on the street, with people. I heard it there. You heard from another resident of Berkeley saying the same essential thing. And if you're going to wait 6 months to batch up a bunch of other commendations, that's fine, you can do that, and that seems to be the procedure here. But my feeling is that this commission should actually take some proactive steps to recognize good work when they hear it. And that was the nature of my recommendation. Thank you.
Is there any final public comment at this time?
Yes. Can't handle my camera at the same time, though.
So thank you for tonight. I'm usually not here at the end of the meeting because I have to rush home, and I do have to rush home again. With regards to the Ben Bartlett incident, I haven't spoken publicly about that yet. I had the pleasure and honor of meeting Officer Cole on one of the game day Saturdays, and she was riding around in her motorbike, and she seems like a very nice, stand-up, by-the-book officer. And I was appreciative. I had flagged her down because somebody was hurt on the side of the road on where I live. He was out of it. It looked like he, I don't know, drank a lot of alcohol or something. And when he looked up, he had a big gash on his chest. It wasn't bleeding out or anything, but you never know. He could be, injured inside. So I flagged her down, and she came right over. And I thought that was great. I mean, that was immediate response. With regards to Councilmember Ben Bartlett, he did apologize for his actions. I was kind of upset for his accusation. However, he did apologize, and nobody, knows how they're going to act on a stop. You can react anyways. I mean, I'm sure he was shocked when you're stopped after riding a red light, or running it, excuse me. Next subject, I went to the barbershop forum, and it was a great meeting. It was a great turnout. I learned in that meeting there were a lot of services for our community to participate. I mean, I was thinking, what are the answers, to stop the violence, to stop, gun shootings, gangs, and there were so many groups there that appeared, and I was in awe. And I hope that, thank you. I was hoping that you guys could be there and see and hear. The police were there, and the community was there, and there was a lot of active members. And if you wish, I did do a video. It's on YouTube. I can send it to, or did I already send it to you? Yes. So if you want, maybe Catherine can share it. Yes, that would be great.
Which meeting was that again?
The barbershop forum.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I just wanted to make, on another topic, this request. My family personally has been hit by crime, and I don't know about all of you. And it affected our family tremendously to this day. And so I don't take crime lightly. And of course, there's different levels. Can't just tiny minute finish. So I guess what brings me here
is trying to seek solutions and trying to come to the table and kind of work this all out for everyone, to make a better place of Berkeley and for everybody. And I want the hate to stop. I don't care what side you are on politics. I don't care if you did a crime and now you're a better person or vice versa. I just want the hate and the crime and the violence